Hello and welcome to the 3 a.m. podcast, where all we talk about is the shit you probably only think about if you're high or suffer from something. My name is Dillon, and I'll be your host. With me today are my two good friends, Kaiden and Kaylee. How's it going, guys?
How's it going?
Would you guys like to introduce yourselves so we have a name with the voice?
I'm Kaiden.
I'm Kaylee.
All right. Well, do you guys know what we're talking about today?
Mental health.
Yeah. Which is probably a good one to start out with, since I said in the beginning, suffer from something. Which I know a lot of us do. If you're a listener out there and you think that you're going through something that's really tough, which I know how tough it can get, you're definitely not the only one, because depression, bipolar disorder, and insomnia have more than 3 million U.S. cases a year, reported cases. So you're definitely not the only one out there that's, having to suffer with that stuff. But that doesn't mean that how you're dealing with it, what it's like for you, isn't uniquely different to yourself, because you have so many different experiences than other people, and you process things differently. So in its own way, yeah, everyone, has these problems and stuff that they're going through, but, we're all going through it in our own way and the best we can, and hopefully the best we can. There's a lot of stuff out there to help you, for sure. To start out with, I have depression. That's no secret. But I got put on a really good medication for it, bupropion. That's what works for me. I've been on it for 3 years now, and it's done really well for me. It's definitely not for everyone. It worked well for me because I'm a heavier guy, so bupropion's known to, promote weight loss, and I was like, all right, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. So, but I started out probably really young, because you guys both know that I started showing signs of adolescent depression, which also share a lot of the same symptoms of ADHD. So I got tested for ADHD by my parents, took me to the doctor and everything, and they're like, no, yeah, he doesn't have ADHD. He's fine. And they're like, okay, that's that. And then it was a shit show ever since. But, it's fine. Live and let live, But it took till my senior year of high school, end of my senior year of high school, to get put on the right medication, because my pediatrician sucked. I hated my child doctor. He put me on a medication for my migraines, which was also used in some doses, for depression as well, called fluoxetine, and that promotes weight gain, which was the last thing I needed. And that didn't help at all, because my migraines were because of stress, and my depression wasn't getting treated, so I was super stressed, and those caused migraines. So I got more migraines. And then it's like, okay, we'll up the dosage of, your fluoxetine. And then that made it worse because I gained weight. And then I was stressed about that. And it was just an awful, awful cycle. And of course, my pediatrician was obese, and he was like, yeah, you need to lose weight. Wait. Yeah? You say that to yourself in the mirror every morning, too?
Got it.
Oof. So that's a little bit into my story now, but we'll get into how I deal with it from day to day, besides being on, bupropion. That just helps me, but we'll get into things I do that help. Which one do you want to go next?
I would say not severe depression, maybe mild depression sometimes, but more of anxiety, sometimes insomnia. But I take the natural path, use herbal supplements like passion flower and skullcap. That's what I do for myself.
You're a lot healthier than I am. if it's gonna fix the chemical imbalance in my brain, go for it, you know. But what about you, Kaylee?
I have dealt with anxiety and depression probably since like 8th grade.
Yeah.
And I don't do anything to treat it right now, but I definitely should. I know that. That's just kind of on the to-do list of things I need to do. I think therapy would be a very good thing, and getting on medication if the therapy doesn't help, but there's nothing wrong with medication, but I want to try other things first for me personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Mental health for me, it started that I went to therapy and it was great for me. I was lucky enough to, you know, get a good therapist that I worked well with first try, you know, and that was my sophomore year of high school. And my parents put me in therapy because they thought it was a motivational issue. And I'm like, yeah, kinda. That's only half of it. It's only kind of a motivational issue. My motivation problem was that I had depression. So it was like, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had to do. I wanted to do it. I just couldn't, you know. That's the best way I can describe it to people sometimes, is you're not unaware of the responsibilities that you have. You just cannot bring yourself to do these things, you know. So they thought it was like a motivational thing. I needed to get organized. I wasn't organized, yada, yada. And started talking more with my therapist about it and started working on things to like help out. He didn't want to diagnose me with depression right away just because of my parents, you know, being like, and this, and like all doctor's reports being like from my pediatrician, signed, he does not have depression, signed Dr. So-and-so. But once I got towards the end of my senior year, when I went to my adult doctor for the first time and I talked to him about it, it was on my first appointment that I had. He was like, no, yeah, it sounds like you have depression. And I was like, yeah? Really? You don't say. And he got me set up with bupropion right away. And, you know, started lower first. That usually is how it works. You start with a lower dosage. And then, you know, worked my way up. Not too far. I think I only upped the dosage like twice. And it's been working for me ever since. And it's only done good things for me. Because for me, when my depression was at its worst, I cannot for the life of me. Like, I try and look back on my sophomore and junior year of high school, and everything's super fuzzy. Like, I have barely any memories of things that happened.
Yeah.
And if I do have a memory of something that happened then, it's only, like, the most embarrassing or most, like, frustrating thing, you know?
Yeah.
Because those are the things you remember the most. And I just finished therapy a little while ago. I'll get into why it was a good decision, why it's like, yeah, I can leave therapy now. I've worked my way to not needing it anymore, which is something you can do. Like, some people are like, I don't want to get into therapy because like they think it's like a lifelong thing, a lifelong commitment. And it's like, no. I mean, you go as needed.
Yeah.
It's kind of like ibuprofen, take as needed. Just the recommended dosage. You know, don't go to your therapist like twice a day and be like, hey doc, I'm not feeling so good. And he'd be like, you were just here like an hour ago. What are you doing? But yeah, therapy worked for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone. I know there's a lot of anxiety that comes along with it. It's really hard to open up to someone. Yeah. The way my brain works though, I'm constantly thinking about a ton of shit, so it's nice to kind of speak my thoughts that I've had, to kind of lay them out on the table, because then I can take it all back in and be like, okay, I can process this information more. It's a lot easier for me to do. Do either of you guys do anything to help with anxiety, to kind of calm you down, like when you know that you're maybe starting to have a panic attack or anything? That, like, I know I'm not one to get panic attacks. I think I've only gotten like 2 panic attacks like in my life, so I'm not one for those. But I've experienced anxiety before. I know a lot of people experience anxiety. There are things that make people anxious, but not everyone like has anxiety where it's a thing that is like, it's always there, you know. Like with depression, it's like the common mistake you know, is people think that being depressed is the same as having depression. And I've always been like, that's so incorrect. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was with older generations and mental health, how they were so like, if we just like brush it off, it's not there, doesn't exist. Oh, they're just sad, they're just a loner, whatever excuse they could come up with. Did you guys ever experience like some of that growing up, being like, oh, they're fine?
Well, my mom suffers from depression and anxiety, so she understands it, and she, you know, is okay with that, and like tries to support and help out.
That's lucky.
Yeah.
Give us a little insight to your homes, like how. Well, you're Mormon, right, Kaylee? Well, your family is.
Yeah. My family has a hard time seeing that mental illness is a real thing. I don't, because I obviously deal with it, but my parents do. And I just think it's because they luckily haven't dealt with it. I think my mom has a little bit, but my dad has it, so to him it's just not a real thing. Like, he thinks it's just, it's like an attitude, and that you can just, like...
snap out of it.
Yeah, or just, like, see the glass half full instead of half empty. And...
it's a switch.
Yeah, it's a choice. It's to him. And...
I'm sure he thinks lots of things are a choice.
Oh, got him. And he just doesn't understand that you can have no control. And there could be part of you that, like, for me, when it happens, my healthy brain is still there a little bit. And it's like, you should go do this. You should do this. You need to get up. But then, like, the fogginess is so strong that I usually don't. Mm-hmm. But, like, it's not a choice. Like, there's part of me that does want to get up and do stuff. Mm-hmm. But I physically can't.
Yeah. I think something that doesn't help is we live in Oregon. It's known that Oregonians have a vitamin D deficiency. Yes. It's sunny out right now. Who knows for how long? But on the day that we're recording right now, it's sunny. It's pretty out. So nice. Oh no, I just ruined the whole thing. I said it's the 3 a.m. podcast, and now they know it's sunny outside. They know we're not recording at 3 a.m.
You just exposed
like
yourself.
Animals. I'm awake at 3 a.m. because I have insomnia. So, but no, I don't know many other people that are up that late. The reason I'm up, so some things with insomnia, it can be caused by depression and all these other chemical imbalances. It can be caused by having anxiety and all these other mental disorders. And I want to be careful with my words, because like if I end up saying this is a very medical topic, so it's, and I'm not a fucking doctor. So like someone hear this and be like, that's incorrect, and be like, okay, well, I'm just talking about my experiences right now. This is what I've had. I'm not saying that anyone else is incorrect. I'm just talking about my experiences that I've had. Yeah. I'm saying that my pediatrician was incorrect when he gave me fluoxetine, 'cause that guy's an idiot. But give him a freaking 230-pound freshman boy fluoxetine, which promotes weight gain. You think that helped? No. Luckily, I'm happy to announce that I am back down to that weight after all that time. So I'm not going to say how heavy it got me, but having depression and other things, like, I know people are like, that's no excuse. It kind of is. I would say it's a little bit. You got to understand, if someone understands depression, they will never say, that's no excuse. Yeah. Having depression is no excuse. But they're not going to, like, baby you either. They're just like, okay, I understand. Mm-hmm. You know, it's easy. At least that's how I am for people. If I'm like, oh, they don't want to do this, or something like this is going on right now, or they don't want to be a part of this because they're having, you know, a pretty heavy spout of like whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, I get it. People have their own things that they're going through. I deal with it like the majority of my friends. Yeah. And one thing I've noticed, you guys can let me know if you noticed it too. When you suffer from something, you're kind of drawn to other people that have similar scars.
Yeah. I mean, I think just about every one of my friends
Yeah.
deals with the same stuff.
It's just nice to have people who understand, you
Exactly.
know? And if you need to cancel plans one night because you're not feeling good, to have people who are like, oh, take care of yourself, it's fine, instead of people who kind of get on your case
Yeah,
and get
they're like,
frustrated.
oh, come on,
with
this
you.
is like the
Yeah.
third time, whatever, blah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's frustrating. I know that a lot of the time, though, when I was in high school, it was just like, oh, Dylan's not going to want to go do this, because it got to the point to where it was like, I'm not really feeling like it. So then people, instead of like being like, let's invite him just to see if he wants to go, it got to the point where they were like, oh, you probably won't want to come. Which made me feel shitty.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants that, you know. People want to be invited to things.
Yeah.
One thing I do that helps, it's definitely something that I started doing later. I started meditating. After I got out of high school, it was just all into this self-discovery and stuff for me. So I started meditating, like listening to guided meditation videos on YouTube and stuff. The only reason I have YouTube Red is so I can fall asleep listening to like guided meditation stuff, because it helps me, it soothes me. The way my brain is I'll shoot from one thought to another and it won't stop. So when I have that, it's something for me to focus on, and it gives me something I can be like, okay, control of my breathing and like feel my body and everything, and kind of get out of my head and move throughout the rest of my body. It's a really soothing way for me to calm down. So I definitely recommend meditation. I've always recommended meditation. I figured so much stuff out because of meditation, like how I feel about certain things. Just when you clear your head, that's when you have the most clarity. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
When your head's clear, you can think the clearest.
Yeah.
So whatever thought I would have after that, I was always able to come to a pretty solid answer. A friend of mine was going through a pretty like tough time, and you know, he started doing some meditating because he didn't know what else to do, and then he started figuring stuff out for himself, and he's been doing great like because of it. I think he still meditates too and everything, which is great because it definitely helps me out. Have either of you tried? I know both of you are in yoga classes, so like, have you guys tried meditation before besides being in yoga class? And if not, did you like it when you were in yoga class?
Something that I do is that's kind of similar is if I'm having a hard time and my brain's just going like a million miles an hour, I'll write everything down that I'm thinking just to physically get it out of my head. And also it forces me to slow down and think about everything. And then I can kind of come to conclusions about it and be like, that is a valid concern, or that's kind of illogical. You can kind of scrap that one. And that's always really helped me a lot.
Yeah, the only I've like dipped my toe into meditation through the yoga class. My senior year is like when I had really bad anxiety, and I was put onto medication for like anxiety and insomnia, and that hydroxyzine, and that's just like to make you sleepy. So it's kind of like a Benadryl, but more, I guess. And then I went to therapy at the high school, and that helped. And then like after that is when I like really like discovered myself and like what I like to do. And I'll usually just try to like breathe deeply and focus on my breathing and the breath, and put on like a funny show or some good music and just kind of try to chill out.
There's just so much stuff that like goes on day to day. So many people are so busy and they get so distracted, they get so stressed out that they forget to take time to take a step back, breathe, kind of think about things, be like, yeah, what I'm doing is working, or be like, you know, there's certain things that I can change to help out and do better for myself, you know.
I think a lot of people cope with depression and anxiety by trying to make themselves more busy so they don't have to think about it. And I think sometimes doing the opposite and forcing yourself to just lay down and breathe and close your eyes and just think about stuff can be more beneficial sometimes, because you can get burned out if you make yourself too busy.
What my therapist, like, would always use as an example for me is I was a balloon, and whenever a problem would show up or something, it would just, that's just a breath in the balloon, and it just got more and more and more to the point to where it would like almost pop, and it would just get too much to handle. I think another good analogy is to carry a backpack, and each time you get like a problem, you put a brick in that backpack, and then the more you put in there, the heavier it gets, and soon the bottom's gonna like burst open and everything's gonna fall out. You know, and it definitely felt like that. It was just a weight of so much stress and shit that I had to deal with. It got to be too much, and because I wouldn't address the issue, I would just like take it in, and it would just be a problem rather than be like, this is what's going on right now, I need to deal with it, or I'm just gonna get worse.
Yeah, I a while ago, like I took this or went to this it was like a self-care workshop. I mean, they just talked about like a lot of people will stay busy and like burn themselves out, and they'll create this cycle of getting burned out, and then after you do that is when like you're like, okay, like this sucks, I'm gonna take care of myself, have a little bit of self-care, and then you just go back to that like cycle of getting busy, trying to keep yourself busy, burning out, then taking care of yourself. Like if you realize that cycle, recognize that, and try to just like take care of yourself the whole time and not, you know, have to go through all of that to realize that you need to take care of yourself. It's very beneficial.
We're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we do what we're used to. Which I always thought was interesting, because it's like we do it because it's what we're familiar with. It's what we're comfortable with. In no way should anyone be comfortable with getting to the point to where they're worn out and miserable. But the fact like we're there and we do that stuff, it's like, it's sad. I think it also stems from people wanting to not impress others, but also do more for others as well as like impress them. We constantly want to satisfy people, even if you're like, oh, I'm not a people pleaser. Sure, all right, that's fine. You can say that about yourself. Like, I know a problem for me was I took on other people's problems, and it just got to the point to where, because I did that, I was making myself miserable, and because of that, I wasn't able to help other people, which was what I wanted to do. So it definitely got to a point where I was like, I need to worry about myself before I can even think about helping other people. Because if I try to help them now, I'm just going to make it worse on myself, and I'm not going to be able to help them the way that they need help. And even now, it's like I've gone even further from that. I don't go out of my way to help someone because I'm living my own life. Everyone's living their own life. If I wanted to, quote unquote, go out of my way to help someone, I would do charity or some shit like that. Bless anyone's heart who does charity. I could never even think about doing that. But yeah, if someone comes to me with a problem, instead of like trying to give them solutions for it or be like, oh, maybe you can do this, you can work it out this way, yada yada, what I do is I ask questions. I'm like, well, why do you think you're feeling this way? Or it's not one of those how does that make you feel type therapy thing, you know. It's just like, well, like why are you feeling, why do you think you're feeling this way? What do you think's like caused it, or why does it bother you? Just general questions like that. And because nothing ever got fixed for me until I figured it out for myself.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've come to realize is that no one's ever going to truly understand it until they figure it out for themselves. One thing I use is, let's say you go to a book reading. Everyone's going to hear the same book, but everyone's going to process it differently. And everyone's going to understand it differently, and it's going to mean something different to them. So unless you're the one who wrote the book, that's your own personal understanding of that. When you give that to other people, they're going to read it and they're going to apply it to their own lives like understand it in their own like vision, their own, the way that they process things, they're going to understand it differently than the next guy, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why whenever I want to help someone or someone comes to me for help, I just ask questions.
Yeah.
Because I understand things differently than they do. Or if I gave them advice, they maybe would take it a different way than what was intended because it worked for me. You know, if something works for you, it works for you. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. Like, that's why I say it about therapy. Therapy's not for everyone. But it helped me. So, like, if you think it'll help you, if you want to try it, if you're really looking for that, do it. But, like, if you're not, then no one's forcing you to. You know, that's just kind of how I feel about it. Well, I've done a lot of talking. Those are just my ideas and things. It's something that's important to me because, you know, I've had to deal with it on my own. It's something that if I know someone's going through it and someone's confiding in me, I want them to get help too. Like, a big thing for me, I didn't get the right help when I was younger.
Yeah.
So if I can help people get that right help that I didn't have right away, I want them to have that. And there's so many options. There's so many different options. And that's another thing that I think people should understand. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that refuse to go to therapy. And they don't have any good reason. They're just like, they've never even tried it. And like, okay, if you've gone to therapy and it hasn't worked for you, you're like, oh, I didn't really like it. I didn't like going in there and talking about stuff. I just wasn't feeling it. The one thing I've heard the most from people is, I didn't like my therapist. Yeah. They just didn't vibe with them. And I'm like, okay, but that's not all therapists. Not all therapists are the same. Mm-hmm. If you want it to work, you can absolutely make it work. I just got lucky. You guys can contribute. Kaiden's done more than you, Kaylee.
I think a big issue is that a lot of people are just not educated about mental illness, and that can result in them not seeing it in other people or not seeing it in themselves because they think that they're fine. And also, I think some people are kind of scared of mental illness because it can be kind of seen in a negative light, even though it's not a negative thing.
Absolutely.
And I think some people don't want to be seen in that light, but what they don't know is, like, some of the most functional people on the planet suffer with mental illness. Everybody does at some point in their life. And I also think it's kind of hard to get resources. Like, I'm sure if you're in college and working full-time, it's hard to have the money to go get resources, have the time, have the drive. And I just think resources need to be more readily available, and I think that we need to be more educated on it so we can know how to recognize it.
One thing, so it was definitely starting out early on. It was like, oh, I can't let people know I have depression, or oh, it's gonna be like this bad thing, you know. Mm-hmm. But now when I find out that like people have depression, it's like, all right, it's it's one of those things.
Yeah.
I think definitely growing up in a pretty sheltered environment. I don't mean my home environment. I went to a private Christian school, so I was with the same kids from like 3rd to 8th grade. That's when I started, was 3rd grade, with the same kids for that long, and I had a lot of these opinions that were just shoved into my brain because of that. And it wasn't that it was ever came out and been like, if you have depression, it means that something's wrong in your life, that something's not going right. It means that something's bad has happened. That's the only reason why it's caused. And it's definitely not because of that. Depression can absolutely be caused by that. If you have lost a loved one, it can absolutely put you into depression or bring on depression. I know for a long time, like, so when my grandma died just 2 years ago, almost 3, my mom, she started to fall into like depression, and it got to the point to where my mom didn't want to do anything around the house. She wanted to mostly lie in bed all day. Yeah. And it only got worse until she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you've developed depression. And it's because when you experience trauma like that grief, it can absolutely shake up your whole fucking world. It can shake up your mind, your brain. I'll never forget when I was in the car with my mom and she told me that, like, she said to me, I understand now, like, what you've had to deal with. And she started crying and I started crying, and she said that, you know, she understood and everything, and that meant so much to me. Like, I by no means have had like a bad life at all. Like, I have a great family. I love my parents. I have a great relationship with my parents. So it was always super hard for my parents to understand why I had depression. They thought it was an attitude thing. I'm just glad they understand it more now, you know?
I think there's this really unhealthy idea that you can't be sad because people have it worse. Mm-hmm. And I think we just need to ditch that whole idea, because it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. It can still affect you. People at the top 1% experience it, and people at the bottom experience it, everywhere in between.
Oh, yeah. It's all just individual experience. Mm-hmm. You know, we're all living, we're on this planet at the same time, but we're all living different lives. What you guys do, how you guys understand things, is different than what I do and how I understand things. And that is where I think people are the most unique, is the way that we process information. And yeah, I would say that's influenced by a lot of things, but I find it really unique. What brings you to that? Like, how you get there, like how you're raised, mm-hmm. and why you think about things the way you do. I was raised, so, little backstory. I was raised going to a Christian school. And it's not because my parents were Bible thumping Christians. They wanted us to kind of be introduced to it because they were both raised Christian too. Mm-hmm. But they didn't go to church every single Sunday or yada yada. They just wanted us to like experience that and feel that love. Because the one thing I will say, growing up and feeling like that love from Jesus, yeah, I'll say it. I felt it was nice. It's a good thing to have. It was at the time a positive experience for me, and that doesn't mean it's a positive experience for everybody. It can be a very negative experience for a lot of people, but like, it was nice to have at the time, and the community was nice to have at the time, but it suffocates individuality. Absolutely suffocates individuality. And that's one problem I had with that environment. You couldn't be yourself. You were restricted to like a certain set of rules. I've sweared a couple times during this podcast. I'm obviously not like held to those rules anymore. Yeah. More than half of my friends are part of the LGBTQ community. I'm definitely not held to those Christian, quote unquote, Christian rules anymore. That's a whole nother episode to talk about, is religion. We'll save that one for another time. I don't want to get into it yet.
A thing that I noticed in my church is they've gotten better about it as they've become more educated, but if you were experiencing depression, it was because you were doing something wrong. Like, you weren't praying enough, you weren't going to church enough.
Oh, so they're like, it's your punishment?
Well, they're if you followed the church more closely, then you'd be happy, because they teach you from the second that you're born, like, if you go to church and read your scriptures and do all these things, then you'll find joy. But if you're doing those things and you don't, then they don't know how to explain that. But they're definitely getting better. I've seen a lot of changes in the church, for sure, and how they teach and stuff like that.
Gotta appeal to those millennials. It's trendy. It's trendy to have mental illness.
I just think they're noticing it because, again, Mormon background, and Utah has one of the highest suicide rates in the country.
Huh, I wonder why.
So I think they're noticing, they're like, maybe something's wrong.
Yeah. oh, maybe we shouldn't make a lot of our followers feel like shit.
That's an idea.
Thanks, Kaylee. You gave me an idea while you were talking, and when you finished talking, I forgot.
That's 100% my fault.
That absolutely is. Oh.
Messed up the whole podcast.
God, you're gonna have to cut this whole thing out.
I know.
You can make like a blooper reel.
It'll be in there. I'll leave some of it. Shit.
God.
All the cussing. Everything else.
Just me cussing. That's the podcast. We should finish up with the mental health topic, I think.
Yeah.
What's a good note to end on? This has been fun. Right?
Yeah.
Talking about, I mean, we've said some good stuff. Like experiences and everything. My best advice that I can give, and because I can't ask each listener individual questions, the best advice I can give is find what works for you. Whether it be medication, natural supplements, meditation, therapy, there's a lot of things out there for you. Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
I would just say, like, there's no wrong way of dealing with what you have going on unless it's harmful.
Yep. Thank you for adding that. That's a good point.
I think it's really important to take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So you need to make sure that things are right with you before you make sure things are right with the ones that you love. Because I know a lot of people want to do that and want to take care of people and want to give everything they have, but that's not healthy and you can't do that.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Yep.
This has been the first episode of the 3 a.m. podcast with your host, Dillon, and my two guests,
Kaiden.
Kaylee.
Yeah! Thanks, guys.